start this by saying I can't be objective about this. I've lived next to the Livingstons for 20 years, and they are family. And most of what I'm going to tell...
Move over talking to the mic. Make sure.
Is the microphone on?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Start it again.
What?
Start it again for those people that are...
Oh, that's okay. Most of what I'm going to tell you, I had to learn and I had to research because I was in the present. I was living next door to the world's best neighbors, and they just happened to have what I found out later was a revolutionary business. Where's my clicker?
Right in front of you.
Oh, thank you. So we travel around Virginia now, and on the side of the highway, we see tourist signs. And it is this winery, and that winery, and this brewery. And you have to consciously think, it wasn't always that way. This is a really relatively recent thing. 50 years ago, as soon as 50 years ago, there was no wine industry in Virginia. But it was the dream of a few hardworking, innovative people, and Jim Livingston was one of them. Hartwood Winery was the result of that dream for him. There he is with folds from the newspaper that we scanned. Virginia did have a wine industry in the form of the Virginia Wine Company that was started by none other than Thomas Jefferson. I think Thomas Jefferson started probably everything in the late 1700s. In 1873, until Prohibition closed down all legal alcohol production in the U.S., they had the Monticello Wine Company here in Virginia. From 1916 until 1975, there was no wine industry in Virginia. The Virginia legislature at that point passed the Farm Winery Act, which allowed for strictly regulated production and sale of wine in the state. Strictly regulated. By the end of the 1970s, there were 6 wineries in the state, including Chateau Morissette and Barbersville, which are still in business. There's a particularly good description of this time in an article in the Virginia Wine Blog. It says, when much of the wine world dismissed Virginia viticulture as a lost cause, an eclectic handful of individuals pressed on, from European immigrants with their wine in their DNA to dairy farm matriarchs with a thirst for something different. One hard-earned vintage after another, these pioneers set the tone for the industry to come. Curious, collaborative, and stubborn in the face of setbacks. Jim Livingston was one of those people. Jim grew up in East Tennessee, and he moved to Virginia in 1970. He spent his career in education as an elementary school librarian. He used to tell vivid stories about making wine in the bathtub of his dorm room in college. To be honest, all of Jim's stories were vivid. So, in '75, there was no wine industry until then. Jim and his first wife, Sharon, got the idea to make wine for their own use. They planted a dozen grapevines, recommended at the time by the Berkeley catalog, in their backyard on their house on Truslow Road. Those vines struggled, they said, and produced mixed quality fruit. In 1980, a neighbor approached them about planting a vineyard on an acre of his property. To do this, Jim and Sharon researched appropriate varieties and the nutritional and cultural requirements for a vineyard, studied markets for excess grapes, etc., etc. If you can see in the top, I stumbled across this photo online. That's why it's got the big watermark in the center of it. This is a photo from 1986, and you can clearly see the vineyard in the upper left of that aerial photo. I think I squealed when I found it. So They took Virginia Vineyard Association classes at Lord Fairfax Community College to educate themselves as much as they could about their new hobby, an education that they supplemented by reading books and trade magazines, attending conferences and seminars, and talking to other Virginia growers, carefully documenting the growth patterns of the vines in their new vineyard operation, which was the first commercial vineyard operation in Stafford. And this actually proves to you that read the labels on your wine bottles and you will learn something. There is a tiny little capsule history of Hartwood, the beginning of Hartwood Winery, right there on the bottle of their Deweese White, which is one of my favorites. This experience made them realize that vines in their backyard were true survivors in the face of their inexperience at the time, with poor site selection, no protection from pests or diseases, home-style pruning that they made up as they went along, trellising, etc. Another vintage photo that I found online. In 1984, Jim and Sharon sold their waterfront property at Lake Anna and used the proceeds to buy 12 acres of farmland in Hartwood. At that time, Hartwood was a close-knit rural community, and there were rumors passed from neighbor to neighbor about the crazy school teacher who was moving to Hartwood and thought he could grow grapes and make wine. You see, there's one shed over on the side. That aerial photo is actually of our property. It turns out they only took photos of the ones that had houses on them, and since there wasn't one there when that photo was taken, they didn't take a photo of the winery proper, but it's the upper right corner. The vineyard was planted first. Like every good business, you get your business underway before you start your buildings and making yourself comfortable. 2,300 Cabernet Sauvignon vines in 1985. Unfortunately, these had to be destroyed 3 years later because they were infested and damaged by crown gall. This was especially tragic because grapevines take from 3 to 5 years to produce a marketable crop. So after 3 years, they had to start completely over and replant the vineyard. The vineyard was replanted with hybrid varietals that have thrived: Seyval Blanc, Vidal Blanc, and Chambourcin. Soon they expanded their offerings by buying additional types of grapes from other Virginia vineyards. Come on, there. When it came time to build the winery building, Jim wanted it to look like a barn. But Stafford County rejected this plan and insisted that it be designed to look like the rural houses in the immediate vicinity. They wanted it to blend into the neighborhood. From the road, the winery building looks like a raised ranch house with a great big front porch, which has a beautiful view of the vineyard. But this caused confusion for the entire life of this business from first-time visitors who often wondered if they were in the right place, even though there was a big sign on the road. By contrast, Potomac Point Winery, which opened in 2007, after the popularity of agritourism was already established, was, according to their website, you enter a European estate which makes you feel as if you're in Tuscany. Oh my, how times changed. The winery opened for business on Saturday, April 29th, 1989, offering Stafford's first commercially made wines for sale. They had 4 wines available: Chardonnay, Vidal, Riesling, and their blended Rappahannock White. That photo, actually, I took that photo wandering the yard with a glass of wine, looking at a particularly lovely sunset, and I had to use it because it's just perfect. The red wines weren't available when they opened. They were still in the barrels, and they wouldn't be available until fall. For a short time, the winery's sale and tasting operations were at a retail space at Hartwood Station, which was on Warrenton Road, right where the Lidl parking lot is right now. This location opened on Memorial Day 1994, and I was thrilled to find this on Google Street View. That's when the Nut Place was there with the beach volleyball court in the front of it. In the beginning, the Virginia wine industry was like a fraternity. All of the members were breaking ground, and each member was helping each other, answering questions, helping solve problems, and sharing their own experiences. And the industry grew. During one harvest, Hartwood's crusher went down, which is a bad thing to have happen because grapes are very, very perishable. And if you've got them in crates sitting on your concrete pad, you need to crush them and get them into the vats. With the grapes in the crates, waiting to be processed, they called their friend Gabriella Rausch in Charlottesville, who immediately offered use of his machinery and saved the day. There really was no professional jealousy at that time. With everybody helping everybody else, and all learning how to make Virginia wine, Jim learned from many friends and other winemakers and found his passion in making enjoyable, approachable wine. As more people became interested in growing grapes and making wine, Jim transitioned from student to mentor, continuing to teach others what he had learned. In the beginning of the Virginia wine industry, most wineries started small without large investors. Making and selling good wine was the goal. Today, wineries are bigger with restaurants and wedding venues and event space to diversify the business. It's a good business model. But often it seems like the craft of making wine is secondary. Jim would joke that he did it on a school teacher's salary and on the backs of his friends. Heard that often. Hartwood was always casual, family-oriented, and child and pet-friendly. Make good wine, offer good service, and people come back. Hartwood had a close-knit of volunteers and friends who helped harvest and process grapes in the fall. And they worked festivals and events. In the beginning, did special events like a grapevine making workshop. That had to have been a hoot. That was before my time. And the annual Harvest Festival was always an event to be anticipated. And I will say, that's my grandson getting on the pony. He's 18 years old and he just graduated from Navy boot camp, so that's an old picture. Volunteers always felt appreciated, and we were happy to help. This is typical Jim right there, raising a glass, thanking everyone for their participation. It's family, you guys. It was family. The original decor of the tasting room was functional, but sparse. Tables, there's the cash register, stuff stacked in the back, and the decor is 3 bottle boxes. After a few years, it got a major upgrade. The new tasting counter, there it is under construction. And there it is in all of its glory. I stood against that counter many, many times. Others? We've done this? There we go. This big blank wall right here with the banner, which I think is the same banner that was at the festival. Just move it from place to place to place. It got opened up. You can see construction. And custom timber frame posts. And it became a beautiful feature, display bottles and awards and memorabilia. There was always something new on those shelves, and no matter when I went over there, I always had to look around and see what I hadn't seen before. Jim added to the Hartwood family in '96. Pardon me? Did you marry in 96? I thought that's when I got it. That's before my time, too. When Jim and Beverly married in 96, and she brought along her 2 young sons, Jason and Kyle, and they grew up in the Hartwood family, too. Beverly learned to do it all. She tended the vines. Come on. She was out there harvesting with all of us, picking grapes, putting them in the crates. And she learned to be a winemaker. Here we are operating the equipment. That's the pump?
That right there?
Yeah.
Well, from the crusher distillery, you go into the red fermenting vats.
Okay. You can see I'm not a winemaker.
Say that louder, Bev. Say it louder. So
Okay, what I'm doing there, when you're working with a red grape, you immediately crush it and put it into fermenting vats. A white wine you would press off right away from picking and crushing, but you're going to ferment on the skins to get your color into the wine. So what she was talking about, the equipment, is that we came in, weighed the grapes, we put them in the crusher distiller, and pumped it right into the vats and put your yeast in and start your fermentation.
You never know where you'd find her during any of these processes. So here she is at the end of the hose, making sure it goes into the vat. And here she is testing the vintage, make sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, just pulling a sample,
Pulling a sample, look at it, taste it.
taste it, and decide, and then through Jim say, is it ready? And he'd say, no, put it back, put some more wine in, top it off.
This needs to get winier.
Pardon?
Needs to get winier.
Yeah.
Sorry. And bottling and packaging, and she was responsible for all of the extensive record keeping and form filings that are required for various levels of alcohol regulation. When I said earlier that it's heavily regulated, the various governments have their hands in it at all stages, and it has to be absolutely perfect. I hunted and hunted. Somewhere, Jim sent me a photo of you at your desk with papers and a cat on them.
Cat was sitting on the desk.
I cannot find it.
It's somewhere.
It's in my computer somewhere because I know he sent it to me.
Yeah.
Well, all of this comes back to Jim because this was his dream. He was the father of it all, a pioneer in what became a multi-million-dollar industry in this state. As I said before, I can't be objective about him because I love him like family. Whether it was goofing with his dog or standing there all dressed up receiving awards at some fancy reception. In the trenches, gluing labels onto wine bottles because someone has to do it. Driving the tractor on harvest day, and from that look on his face, do not step in front of the tractor. He's determined. He's getting those grapes where they need to go. He was a wonderful friend and a neighbor, and I admit I was incredibly thankful when the last electric golf cart died. Because those things are silent, and I'm hard of hearing. And he used to sneak up on me regularly and then laugh and drive off. At least then he had to replace it with a golf cart, with a gas-powered one. So at least that one, that one made a putt-putt noise, so he couldn't sneak up on me anymore. I saw him like this a lot. Whenever there was a gathering, he wanted to capture it. He wanted to remember, and he wanted to immortalize his friends who were there. So that is what he looked like. Camera in your face. He'd say, "Smile." Fine. And we would. He texted me one afternoon. He said, go check your camera. I keep a game camera in the back of the property just so I can see what kind of varmints are back there. And that's exactly what he says. He says, check your camera. I think you caught a varmint. Yeah, I definitely did. Jim took a long shot dream of growing grapes and making quality wine, and he grew it into a business that laid the foundation for the success of agritourism in Virginia today. Look at that. It looks like the Bat Cave. In 2015, after years of talking about retirement, they made the decision and the winery was officially listed for sale. 12 acres. 7 acres of it planted with a mature and very productive vineyard. All of the buildings and all of the equipment would convey. It was a turnkey operation and ready for a winemaker to step in and get to work. But the buyers weren't there. It was a farm winery, and it needed a farmer to be its next caretaker. Jim died unexpectedly on the morning of November 29th, 2019. Beverly, being Beverly, carried on. With the help of her family and friends, Hartwood's few employees, and her own tenacity, just because she is Beverly. And then stepped another challenge. March of 2020, COVID. The world changed. Every business had to come up with a new way of doing things after being forced to shut down for our own safety and their safety in a world where we didn't know what was going on. So they ended up with a challenging new way to do business with social distancing and curbside delivery and disposable utensils and hand sanitizer and masks with logos on it, but they made it work. Finally, in December 2020, after a farewell tour, 25% off sale to try to empty the cellar?
Yeah.
Beverly retired and the winery closed. Hartwood's legacy lives on. Grapes and in our memories and in the hearts of so many people that are in here that I know are also part of the Hartwood family. Here's a postscript that I couldn't do last week because this program had to be postponed from August. That photo was taken yesterday afternoon. In the 2 years since the winery closed, the property's been a vineyard. The grapes are contracted to other vineyards to make wine. So Beverly and the volunteers have still been tending the vineyard, harvesting the grapes, just not making wine with them. And it's been a private home. Beverly lives in the apartment right there on the property. The vineyard's smaller now. It's a lot more manageable. And the next generation will soon be making their home in one of the spots where the grapevines used to be. If you look, since it's frozen, the Bermuda grass has died off, so you can see where the vines used to be. You couldn't last month. It was just all green across there. So that's where the vines used to be, and now there's a home being built there. Beverly's son Jason and his family are making this their forever home. Foundation's finished. Floor platform went on this week. It's coming along. That's it. Do we have any questions? You answered the other ones.
See, I've lived here all my life, and I always thought, I never could figure that out. I seen a house there, and I always go by that. I never thought that was a winery. So I think you got ripped off by the county by making y'all do that.
Remember when that was, though?
Yeah.
Virginia and alcohol have always had a really difficult relationship.
Really,
And I'm not sure that Stafford really, they weren't sure that it was going to succeed, and I don't know if they wanted like a big old empty winery there.
Right, and that was my understanding, is that the land was kept either for farming, or if that failed, the county said if it failed, then we could go ahead and you could put a subdivision in there. And from what Connie tells me, everybody on the Hartwood website is upset there's a subdivision. No, another one going in. No, it's just my son's home. But we have enough vines that we've kept.
Right.
That, like she said, we're selling to other small wineries.
Yeah.
I still have my license. If I wanted to do a custom crush, which means I could make a wine for another winery, I could do that.
Right.
But age factors coming in, I don't have my partner there, Jim, to help me anymore, and most of my staff. Heather here worked for us for 4 years. She knows all about what went on.
Is your son interested in taking this over or not?
No, he helped when he was a teenager, and he said, "Listen to me, Mom. You know how kids are." And it's farming.
Understood.
But he's a director now for Cisco Systems, so he's done well and worked from home. So when the home is built, he said, "Mom, I can help you more. I can't be there during the week." So last year I did. Connie was out there watching me too, and then Steve came by when the inline wind went by, and he said, the vines were on the ground. This was a year ago. He said, "Are those going to survive?" And I said, "Yeah, we just got to get them back up." But yeah, it's farming, and most small farmers like Johnny over there, or any of your children interested in carrying on the winery?
I'd like to think so. My children are still young, so.
My children, Johnny, he's doing
Yeah, I know
it.
he did. Was any of his children? No, they realize it's farming, it's climate
hard.
change, weather factor, everything, and being small. Everything you make goes back into it.
Understood.
And then you can have bad years. We have bad years with the vineyards too. 2018, we lost so much crop in Virginia as vines because we had the freezes in April.
Right.
I had 4 on site and my vines were brown, so it's just farming.
Yeah.
So most young folks know, but my son has come back and he helps me now with the vineyard. He knows the equipment too and everything, and he can help. But that wasn't his dream. And most farmers, their kids don't want to do it because they can't make a living from it, being small.
Right.
Being small.
Bev, I was wondering, so the vines that you have now, are they red or?
We have red and we have white.
And you have white.
Yeah. Sable Blanc left, and we have Chamberson, which is they're hybrid grapes, and they're most of the time most disease resistant and hardier than some of the, like Chardonnay every year, particularly in Virginia, the Chardonnay bud out first, but then you have the late freezes, so they lose, particularly if you're near the mountains, you're going to lose a lot of crop. So Johnny can also over there give you a lot of information on the vines and the vineyards.
I know those wines aren't for this, but maybe you should go into jelly making now. Winery jelly.
We looked out one time, the grapes were not ready to pick yet, but they had changed color. And there was a family out there with baskets on there getting ready to pick, and it was like, this is not a pick your own grape thing. We had to take them in the cellar and show them that, this is a winery making, but they were getting ready to pick, and it was like, no, we need every grape we got. But yeah, it's if you enjoy a glass of wine, if you knew what went into producing that glass of wine, you would appreciate it so much more. Because it's not, we're out there working on the vines in the wintertime. Right now, we just finished taking off bird netting. We're getting ready to throw fertilizer. once we have the first hard freezes, we're going to be doing our winter pruning, because normally you have bud break in early April. Again, that's getting iffy now because of the climate change.
Right.
But you've got to have all this done ahead of time before those buds start, or the vines start budding out. So it's farming. It's not just summertime picking the grapes, and it's year round. If you're small like that, not only are you working on the paperwork and you're working with customers, you're in the vineyard once you close for business for the day. Yes, sir.
Are you still considering selling that land?
No, sir. It's staying in the family.
Good for you.
We just made the decision that to keep it in the family, particularly when my son came and said, Mom would like to build a home there and we'll help you with the vineyard. So, you know, that made the decision. Plus, like Connie, it's home. It's home.
Have you considered a different, growing something different there, like Connie's roses or something?
My son was talking about that, and I said, yeah, it's up to you, because sooner or later I'm going to kick the bucket and you can do what you want with it. But he likes working with the vines, and he's already got some ideas and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of come full circle, you know, being a teenager and I really don't want to be here, and going off and finding his life's work and then coming back and say, you know, so yeah.
Grapes don't bite you, roses do.
Yeah. Well, if you're out pruning in the wintertime and somebody is 4 vines down from you and you're both pruning, we get what's called a bull cane sometimes on a vine, and that's the big old thing that just takes off and hits down the row. So when they're cutting it in the wintertime and it's cold and they pull that sucker and it comes back and hits you in the face, it's like, okay. So yeah, you can get hurt in the vineyard, okay?
I did not know that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can be pruning it and say, okay, I'm going to do this with this and this vine and this, because everyone's a little bit different. And then you go back and you realize, I just cut what I wanted to save. So, you know, it's a new experience every day. But it's something that you just fall in love with.
And as a result, Steve and I fell in love with it too. I had no idea what a winery really meant until I went over there. Now I'm not scared of them anymore.
Well, what she found out was it 2 summers or 2 years ago when we took the last Chamberson by the barn. And Chamberson is a red grape, love it to death, but it has what we call uneven berry ripening. So that means you'll have a cluster of grapes, half of it is really dark and pretty, and half of it on that same cluster you can see the light through it, which means it's not all maturing at the same rate. So you've got to be patient and let those particular vines mature a little bit longer. There was 2 rows by the barn that were just, they weren't ready. They were really green. The rest of it was ready to take. She and her mom went over.
My sister.
Your sister.
My sister.
And what, a month later, I guess?
It was a couple, well, these 2 rows, they were not going to ripen on time to put into the crop. They already had their red, they already had them doing their thing in the fermenting vats. So I said, hey, Beverly, can I go pick those? And she said, sure, I'm going to make jelly out of them. Best grape jelly ever. Figured, let you know, Chamberson makes awesome grape jelly, but she warned me. She said there's a lot of sediment in it. I had to filter it twice, otherwise I had junk in the bottom of my jars.
Yeah,
I gave it as gifts. I'm jealously guarding the last 2.
I'm hoarding mine too. But no, those grapes, I've had people ask me, customers say, can you make jelly out of them? Yes, they're grapes. But the particular wine grapes that we're growing, they're very tough skin, they have a lot of seeds in them. So yeah, it would be hard cleaning them up to make a jelly. But yeah, you could.
And it did. It took a bunch to get the seeds out, get the skins out, get the sediment out. But I'm a mad scientist. It was worth the effort.
But it is, if you visit, and trust me, the state of Virginia, every time we turned around, they were taxing you for something. So, I mean, it is not, unless you're a big, got lots of money, and like Potomac Point, you're paying a lot of taxes. You're paying taxes on the grapes before, the wines before you sell them. You're paying taxes on them after you sell them. And then at the end of the year, you're paying federal taxes just for the privilege of growing grapes and making wine.
And that's why, as a business decision, the newer operations that are coming in, it makes perfect sense for them to diversify and have a more steady stream of income.
Right.
So have the events, have the wines for their customers, have the vineyard for photo shoots, all of it.
Like she mentioned earlier in her speech, when you're building a new winery now in Virginia, and you got your business plan, it's the fifth thing on that list from the top where you're worried about the grapes and making wine. The first is events and your weddings and your present. It's just the winemaking really does come in second now. It's all about the ambiance. People want to be entertained at a winery now. When Jim opened up in '89, maybe there was 20 wineries in the whole state. Now there's close to 300 of us.
Wow.
Probably more. I haven't been keeping up as much with what's going on with ABC like I did when we were open. But there's changes all the time. But most of the time it's okay, now you're going to be charged, you're going to pay taxes for this. And it's like, okay. So,
So in the beginning, when it's just a winery, you do it because you love it.
yeah. And then after a while it becomes a job. But the little guy starting out 30 years ago, it was a love. And like she said, we had a core group of, we couldn't afford to pay a lot of staff. So we had a core group of folks, friends that just helped you. What you doing? You got another festival? Can we help work it? You pick it, love to do that, So that's how the little guys survive, is with their close followers.
I selfishly am glad you still have at least some vineyard, because harvest days are some of my favorites. It's a group of us that have known each other for years. We usually only see each other at Christmas and harvest days.
And I
Get
feed them
dirty,
real good and give
eat
them a
grapes
bottle
as
of
a
wine,
pair.
so they're happy.
When is Harvest Day?
When the grapes tell Beverly that they're ready, but it's usually late August in the front and September in the back.
Depends on the variety you grow, right, Johnny? So the variety you grow normally, our Save-All always, of the 3 varieties we grew on site, our Save-All always was ready mid to late August.
Everything other than August one.
Yeah. Normally you had a 2-week break and then your Chamberson came in, but I had 2 sections of Chamberson, one up closer in the back, and then one in the very back of the land, and it was like 2 different clones of Chamberson. So you could look on one of the photographs and see one is a little different color in hue than the other section. Sometimes they came on differently from each other, but normally the Chamberson came on, but then you were fighting the uneven berry ripening. I have another gentleman down the road on Hartwood that is getting ready to open up a small winery, and he's growing Chamberson, and I'm trying to teach him. It's uneven berry ripening. He brought his sample this past harvest, and I said, TJ, you're not letting your grapes mature enough. They're very, very light. You've got to let that Chamberson. Do I have to do 2 fermentations? I'm afraid so. You've got to let whatever sections in your vineyard mature, work with it, let the other ones continue ripening. So it's a learning curve for him. But most of us in the state don't grow everything we need, so you supplement by contracting and purchasing from other vineyards for the grape varieties you don't grow and want to work with.
You can see it's another small winery opening up the road from us. Please let us know when that is, because TJ's gonna need help picking his grapes, and he's gonna need people to drink his wine, and I'll be happy to take a bullet for the team.
I'll let you know. He'll probably put it out there on his website too. He just got federal
I knew he was working, but I remember him walking the vineyard with Jim
Right.
in the very beginning when they were talking about this, and I think he was trying to talk him out of it.
He said, you don't know what you're getting into, but
Right.
he really wants to do it. It's a love thing, so, you know, we'll see how it happens for him.
How far down is he away from you? How far down the road is he?
Well, that's the thing. When you're little guys and you're off the road a little bit, people really have to want to go to you. So he's going to be toward the end of Hartwood Road. So it'll be about 6 miles off from the beginning of Hartwood Road by the elementary school. It goes on down. And I have no idea what he's going to call his little winery. I just know he's getting ready to put a structure up.
Just curious.
Yeah.
If you know right where to look for it, you can get a peek of the vineyard that he's planted on the dangerous curve. You can't look but for a second.
That real bad curve, and I'm going, oh, DJ.
It is Hartwood Road after all.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, and the vineyard is in back of his house. It's got a big old beautiful home.
Okay, it was rough, but I'm done.
Thank you.